Hello everyone and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is the 21st of April and it's been a while since we've been able to have a chat, hasn't it? Lots of exciting things have been happening and I'd be glad to tell you a few things about those now. But before, of course, we get into any of that, it is the most exciting time of the Q&A calendar when we do a prize week. Now, this is where we look back at all the fantastic questions that you guys have been asking and that we have been able to have a chance to answer and discuss on this Q&A over the last couple of times, and we pick the best one, and the best one of course wins a prize. So we have been looking back through all the amazing questions and some of them bring to mind some brilliant laughs. I mean, who can forget, of course, Latifah Walker's question about the unibrow in ancient Greece and Rome, or Sarah Scotty asking about Roman graffiti that really isn't simply about letters, numbers, or the male anatomy. We've talked about COVID and the Spanish flu. We've talked about how convincing a kind of hero that Aeneas is, and is Turnus or better hero of the Aeneid. We've talked about Libya. We've talked about underwater archaeology. We've talked about whether the Greeks and Romans were carbon neutral. We've also talked about stag parties, and we've talked about women in the ancient world. So, my lordy, have we covered some topics. But the winner of the question that really kind of got me thinking and giggling a little bit was from Mariam Zaidi, and she was asking about the Oracle at Delphi also working potentially as a marriage counsellor. And that got us into, well, we don't know that much about the intricacies of the everyday kind of consultations of the Oracle at Delphi, but we do know that Plutarch, who was a priest of Apollo at Delphi, used to sort of say in his texts that have survived to us that, you know, the humdrum main business of the oracle was basically, shall I marry, shall I sail, shall I do business? Those kinds of really quite boring stuff. And then we looked at the oracle at Dodona, the oracle of Zeus at Dodona, where of course all the questions are written down on lead tablets and indeed some of the answers. And we were able to delve into the wonderful world of people asking about whether or not they should get married, whether or not this was the right girl, whether or not they should stay with this girl, whether or not they should stay with their man, whether or not they should put up with him, should they marry again after they were widowed, how best to beget children, how best to look after your children. And indeed, there's that famous question as well that comes from the Oracle of Zeus at Dodona. I don't know if we mentioned it the last time around, but it comes from a concerned father. And as a father myself of a daughter, I can well identify with this question. The question was, how can I best protect my daughter from the horrors of the reality of life and all the sorts of odd and dangerous things that she might get up to if she was not properly looked after. So absolutely brilliant. Mariam Zidi, you are our winner. So please do get in touch through the Facebook page or by emailing us at michaelscottacademic@gmail.com, letting us know your address so that we can send a gift out to you. And that can be a copy of Ancient Worlds, a copy of From Democrats to Kings, the first book I ever wrote, or a copy of my Introduction to Ancient Greece book, particularly for Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, if you've got some little ones around as well. So thank you, Mariam, so much for your question. Thank you to you all for your fantastic questions. They have been brilliant, and as ever, it's your questions that make this Q&A so much fun. So do keep them coming in. And once again, congratulations to Mariam. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching from all over the world. It's great to see where you are watching from and reading about that in your comments. Do always let us know. I'd love to know where you're watching from around the world. Patricia is in Harrogate. I've seen one other person is in Germany, and a number of other places around the world as well. So we've talked about the April prize, but I mentioned obviously that it's been a little while since we've had a chance to get together, and that's because not only have it's been a very busy time. We've had the end of the University of term of Warwick, but also, and then of course the very busy Easter holidays, particularly busy for those looking after small children running around, but also you will be aware, as we've been talking about stag parties, and I've been on my stag party, that we are now just 9 days away from Cassandra and I getting married. So we are in the final stages of preparation for that and getting very excited about our wedding on the 30th of April. So there's been that going on. And then, of course, there has also been the preparations for the Warwick University Resonate Festival that is going on right now around me. Here I am live from my office at the University of Warwick. This is our new office in the Faculty of Arts building, brand new building dedicated to the study of arts Arts and Humanities, which is basically being known as either FAB, the Faculty of Arts building, or it's being known as the Hogwarts castle, because it has a whole set of flying staircases through a big open central foyer that I'm sure keep moving on me. So from coming live to you from Fab or from Hogwarts, depending on your particular choice, here we are, and I am about literally in the next hour to go live on stage here at the Resonate Festival. So I'm finishing up with you guys and then dashing straight over to another building just next door that I can see out of the window here, to the Oculus building, and talking about was there fake news in ancient Greece. So we'll be going over to work with a live audience over there from 6 till 7 this evening. But it's been a great couple of days here at the Resonate Festival. Yesterday we had the big family day, so great fun range of events, everything from circus trapeze artists and clowns and comedians to well, kind of the science of farting. You know, I learned 2 new things by being in this lecture, and I was there because my 6-year-old was also there with us, but I learned on the one hand, this was a lecture that sort of followed food from when you eat it all the way through to when it comes out the other end. Turns out that, here we go, sharing 2 new exciting scientific facts with you here, that on average we each make about 1.5 litres of snot each day, and when we have a cold we can make up to 4.5 litres. Wow, most of which we swallow. And then the second major scientific fact, which, you know, kind of, I think gents out there, we've always known this, that men produce more farts by volume than women do, but in fact it is scientifically proven that on average the female fart is actually smellier than the male fart. There you go. I mean, you know, it's science. What can you do? The facts are there. They are absolutely incontrovertible. And people joining right now may wonder what has happened to the ancient Q&A that they had signed up for. Anna Petres coming to us from Portugal. Yes, I promise we will get on to some ancient questions. We are talking about the Resonate Festival at the University of Warwick, where I work, and the fabulous things that were on for our Kids' Day yesterday. And alongside learning about these wonderful facts and figures about the ancient world, we also had the Romans there in force and the Greeks there as well. So we were cooking up a storm. Roman food cookery lessons were going on. Live dishes were being prepared, including some garum to be able to taste. There was a symposium, ancient drinking session for kids using Ribena, of course. And there were lots of other great fun things going on alongside that, including mural making. And also they were doing some great stuff looking at making your own pottery and using ancient vases or our replica vases, and actually being able to look at some real ancient vases as well. And of course, we also had, on the first night of the Resonate Festival, on Tuesday night, we had ancient music being played here on campus. There was a whole performance being done of what music might have sounded like back in Roman Britain, and what were the really kind of popular kinds of instruments in the Greco-Roman world, along with kind of how did that change over time within the ancient world, particularly with the the adoption rather, particularly of Christianity, say, for the Roman world. How did that change people's approaches and desires and interests in relations to song and music? So we've really been getting the ancient world in amongst everything that we've been talking about at the university over the last couple of days, and I'm looking forward to thinking a little bit about the problems that we have in our modern political systems tonight. That includes fake news, obviously, and voter apathy and things like that, and kind of looking back into the ancient world, seeing what the ancients did about these sorts of things and whether we can learn from them in any way, shape or form. But the other thing that's been happening over the past couple of weeks, and one of the reasons why I couldn't come to you live in our normal kind of 2-weekly slot as we normally do, as you may have seen broadcast out through the Facebook page and Twitter and other mediums, is that I was off interviewing Stephen Fry. So yes, we had that great honour of going to interview Stephen Fry, who this year has been the honorary president of the Classical Association. And as part of that presidency, which lasts for a year, he gave an interview which was broadcast live then for the first time at our Classical Classical Association annual conference. So this is where people interested in classics who are teachers in schools or who are academics in universities, or indeed interested members of the public as well, we all come together in one big classics party. And this year it was at Swansea University, and we talk about the ancient world for a good couple of days, and lots of papers are presented and lots of ideas are discussed. And Stephen did the interview with me that was broadcast live on the first night of that conference. And it was a great honour and pleasure to be able to interview him. And he was extremely funny and erudite, as you may well expect. And also showed a deep love for the classics that goes really all the way back to his youth as a kid. Something that he's always just found an affinity with, particularly the languages of Latin and Greek, and then the dramas and the myth-telling stories, which has come out, of course, in his most recent set of books. So it was a great joy to be able to speak to him and see, well, as you will have seen, hopefully, from some of the clips, but you can definitely watch the full interview on YouTube. We'll have posted the link on the Facebook page, and you can also see it on Twitter and Instagram. But my particular favourite was when he told us that if he had to choose between going dressed as Apollo or Hermes to a Greek god's fancy dress party, then Stephen Fry would pick Hermes. Now, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting him to be an Apollo kind of guy, but he went for Hermes, and particularly it was all about the winged sandals, I think, that really got him kind of excited. So there we go. Stephen Fry, absolutely great. And we're going to be launching on social media and on the Facebook page in the next day or two an extra little clip from Stephen where he was very, very kind and said a few nice things also about his interviewer. So we kind of will be putting those out as well, which was very good of it. So do catch up with all of that as well. So it's been a busy couple of weeks. But your questions have been coming in, and so it's a joy and delight to be able to get to your questions as well. So the first question that we've had is from Bill. Now, Bill, you didn't give your surname. You are Bill P. So Bill P, here was your question. Have you studied much or heard of the Dispilio Tablet, which was discovered in Kastoria in northern Greece? Right. Now, many of you may well have heard of the Dispilio Tablet, but it would give you a little bit of a breakdown about what Bill P is talking about here. Now, Kastoria in northern Greece, as he said, and it's on the side of a lake. Right? When a lake got particularly low, when there was a bit of a drought, back in the 1930s, actually, it was suddenly noticed that on the shore of the lake at these low water levels, you could see the outline of some kind of ancient settlement. Now, it wasn't investigated much at the time, particularly because they didn't really know how to get at it. It was being protected, a lot of it, under kind of thick mud that was actually doing a brilliant job of preserving so much of the stuff that was there. So they left it, and it wasn't actually until the 1990s that they came back, and a team led from the University of Thessaloniki in Greece started to excavate there. And what they found was a neolithic settlement. So that's actually dating, well, sort of, the site actually ended up dating from about sort of 5,000 BCE through to about 3,000 BCE. But then one of the most spectacular finds was what became known as the Dispilio Tablet. So this was a wooden tablet that had actually survived when they carbon-14 dated it from around about 5,200 BCE. I mean, this is staggeringly old. And it had survived, again, because of being deep in the mud. In those anaerobic conditions where there's no oxygen, which meant that the wood had not deteriorated. But in fact, the moment they excavated it, it started to deteriorate. So they had to rush it to conservation, where they are still doing conservation work on it now to try and preserve it fully. But on this wood tablet was a whole series of symbols. Writing, we think. But there the question marks start. Now, 5,200 BCE is an extraordinarily early date to be seeing kinds of writing. Now, I'm going to put this into context. You've got Linear A that we think about in the Greek world, and that's the kind of earliest writing systems that we really think. Linear A or Cretan hieroglyphics, sort of one or the other. They're dating from 2000 to 1,800 BCE, and Linear A continues through to about 1,450. We haven't deciphered it, right? We don't have enough of it to crack the code, but then Linear B that was the Mycenaean language, the following civilization from about 1400 BC onwards. That was cracked in the 1950s, and we're able to read the surviving amounts of Linear B to us. But 1400, 1800, even 2000 BC, how does that compare to 5200 BCE? In fact, it's extraordinary, even if you look more widely across the ancient cultures of the world. Now, the oldest kind of, normally the language is recognised to be the oldest written language surviving in the world is Sumerian cuneiform. But that is only dating from about 3200 BCE. So kind of, if this is a text of language, right, then we have something in our hands here with the Dispilio Tablet that is almost roughly about 2,000 years older than that, right, which is absolutely extraordinary. So older than Egyptian hieroglyphs, older than Sumerian cuneiform. The problem is that we've got so little of it just surviving on this one little bit of wooden tablet. It's going to be impossible for us to actually decipher it. We just don't have enough of it to be able to crack the code. So it's going to remain one of those tantalizing mysteries, I think, of the ancient world. But it is just a sentiment alongside all the other things they recovered from this Neolithic settlement. So, the outlines of buildings, wooden walkways, fruit, bones, all the sorts of things that the settlement was eating and throwing away. Even the oldest surviving flute instrument was found there as well. It really is just a taste of what and the complexities of civilization at an otherwise thought to be very, very early stage. So Bill P, thank you so much indeed for your fantastic question. Emma Freeman has also had a question in saying, right, on the TV shows where you use LIDAR and the 3D scanning technologies, why are the fly-throughs so fast? Firstly, we want to have a better look around, and secondly, it's dizzying and makes many people queasy. Please could you ask the people in charge of this to slow the heck down? Emma, I very much agree with you that the fly-throughs can be quite disorientating and quite speedy. Now, it depends entirely on what the fly-through is doing kind of within the film as and its role as a sort of on-screen piece. Is it simply in getting the viewer and the presenter in many cases from point A to point B, in which case it's not really about seeing what's in between, it's just kind of visualising the distance travelled, right, which is why they go through them quite fast. Or indeed relating 2 points. All you need to know is roughly kind of where point A is in relation to point B, and you zoom through the scanned universe in order to be able to make that transition. Again, that's why often they're going pretty fast. But oftentimes as well, I think it's a misalignment or a misjudgment about how people's attention spans. Because people who are involved in film and TV often talk about the attention span, that if a person is looking at something, a specific kind of image for more than even a max of 20 seconds, they might start to get bored and switched off. And so people who are making TV often think about the need to change and move up and keep the pace up with the visuals at a much higher rate than perhaps many of us who are really interested in all of the detail would really appreciate. So I think sometimes it's about an expectation of attention span versus a reality for a portion of the audience who are really fascinated and engaged with the material, as opposed to those who are just tuning in for a kind of piece of entertaining, vaguely informative TV. And it's also obviously a question of overall time length that the programme has. If you've got 50 minutes to be able to tell a story and there's lots to do, then every second spent flying through a visual is not necessarily a second that you can spend talking about something else. And so everything is a trade-off between those speeds of visuals, the role that each visual is supposed to play, the expected attention span. And hopefully we get that balance right, but we're never going to get that balance right for all viewers, right? Because every viewer comes with a different level of interest, a different level of attention, a different level of expectation. So I'm very, very sorry that we make you queasy. But what I can suggest, and I think these are still available on YouTube, is that alongside the Ancient Invisible Cities series, which we did for Cairo, Athens and Istanbul, there were YouTube sort of semi-3D visualizations that were under your control to be able to fly through and do at your own pace and look where you wanted to go. And that was the kind of other answer that we offered, where people had a bit of control over what they went to see themselves. So if, again, we can pop these links back on the Facebook page and make sure, so do keep an eye out for them, and hopefully you can enjoy going through these sites, looking at them in your level of detail that you want, and that will be a brilliant, I think, and helpful solution. So Emma, thank you so much indeed for your question as well. And a third question has come in from Ricardo Bartales Villacorta, who is asking, what's the difference between philosophy and religion for the ancient Greeks? So this is an absolutely great question from Ricardo. What's the difference between philosophy and religion? Well, one of the things I really like about this question is that it shows, well, one thing is a very, very Greek concept, philosophy. The word is Greek, isn't it? It's philosophia, so the love of wisdom. Religion is not a Greek word. In fact, famously, the Greeks had no word for religion. The religion comes from the Latin word religio, the verb to kind of bind together, to bond everyone together. And that tells you a lot about how the Romans thought about the role and importance of religion within ancient society. But in terms of the Greeks, we've got this thing which is very much a clearly defined and named concept, philosophia, the love of wisdom. And this thing that was just omnipresent and so omnipresent and kind of just part of the way the world worked that it didn't even need a name. So kind of how do we distinguish between those things? And sometimes it is very, very difficult. But for me, I guess the difference would be, rather than religion, and Greek religion, when you start to think about it, is very weird in lots of ways. There is no key text. There's no equivalent of the Bible or the Torah or so there's no kind of key text which sets out the sort of key beliefs, the key readings, the key findings, the key ideas. There's no clear statement of belief, right? In ancient Greek religion, there's nothing that you can turn to and say, you are a believer in the Greek gods if you believe X. Right? And in fact, actually, it was a much more a set of traditions and ways of living and ways of society doing things, and a way of understanding the relationship between the human level and the divine level, and indeed the underworld level as well. Whereas philosophia was a way of approaching particular questions and getting to some kind of answer. Right? So it was an objective inquiry into a particular issue. And in some ways, and what people looking back at who see Greek philosophy at the kind of font of philosophy more generally and of a particular way of questioning the world, is that objective inquiry is kind of an unbiased, or as unbiased as human beings can potentially ever be, questioning that favours no particular outcome. Right? It follows a process, a logical process through which you get to a answer in response to a question. Now, often those questions that are asked and answered in religious terms in the Greek world, or in the philosophical terms, are the same questions. Right? So you could ask, what is the nature of the universe? Right, Sophie, you were talking about creation theory. Yeah, this idea of the earliest philosophers that appear in the Greek world are asking about kind of what is the nature of the universe? Where does it all come from? And they postulate the idea of there being a kind of unique original force that brings things into being. Right, so you can be asking exactly the same questions. Or another obvious question which is answered and can be answered religiously in terms of the gods is, what is justice? Right, what is justice? Right, what are the gods doing to keep justice for all? But you cannot ask those and answer those with a philosophical process of examination and inquiry as well. And then, of course, that expands out to a whole series of political, social, ethical considerations about what is it to lead a good life, right? Which philosophy makes very much its own question. What is it to be a good citizen? How do you live ideally within a great society? How should society function to function at its best? All of these kinds of questions become the real meat of philosophy over time. So there is this kind of uneasy but a symbiotic relationship between philosophy and religion in the ancient Greek world, and most of the time they seem to get on, and obviously the balance changes between the two over time as philosophy becomes more and more powerful and respected and kind of followed. And there are also crunch points. Socrates would be an obvious example of a crunch point, wouldn't it? Whereby someone, a philosopher, Socrates himself, ends up being accused in the law courts of Athens, and the charges he's brought on are of not following and worshipping the gods that the city follows, right? So not doing the religious stuff as is expected of him. And one of the things that he actually responds to, which people got completely upset about as well as part of that, was he talked about having his own god inside him talking to him, and that was something the Greeks were not entirely comfortable with, as opposed to kind of you following the sort of normed traditions of religious worship. So these two can come into clash, and they did. And Tracy, you were thinking of Socrates as well. There we have it. So it can be a rather difficult and sticky relationship, as well as quite a good and an interesting one at the same time. So Ricardo, thank you so much indeed for your question. So we need to quickly take a break before we might be able to squeeze in one more question, and talk about some of the things that are in the news and what's on right now. So from the Daily Mail, step inside an ancient Pompeian home. Scientists use virtual reality to reconstruct the stunning house of Greek epigrams before it was destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. I think this is brilliant. The idea that you could go to Pompeii. We all want to go to Pompeii. Who doesn't want to go to Pompeii? But if you can't go to Pompeii, you can also explore Pompeii in virtual reality as well. I think this is brilliant. And sticking with Pompeii, The Guardian has talked about, as I think many of you have been talking about on the community page, as well as kind of on the Facebook page, the robot dog that is now patrolling Pompeii, particularly at night, to keep the site safe from those who would still try to dig illegal tunnels into it and to kind of steal relics away. The dog-like robot is using the latest in a series of technologies alongside drones and other sorts of things to keep the Pompeian park safe. That's absolutely brilliant. The robot dog. And we in fact here had at Warwick, as part of Resonate Festival in the last couple of days, a robot dog of our own going around, which was great to see. Then alongside our news about Stephen Fry and the interview with Stephen Fry, one of the things that Stephen also did as honorary president of the Classical Association was kind of read and actually kind of voice one of the stories that had been created as part of the 2022 Classical Association competition. And the overall winner of that competition was Madeleine Friedlin, and her story was called Fate's Engine. And you can actually listen to that narrated by Stephen Fry on Spotify. And again, the link will be on the Facebook page. Absolutely brilliant. And he was kind of really, really, really impressed with the quality of Madeleine's story, which is so great to hear. And then this is quite an exciting one as well. European Gaming talks about the company EvoPlay has delivered a new video game called The Temple of Thunder, which is going to be an enthralling new slot that provides players with a Greek-themed classical adventure. Temple of Thunder takes place on Mount Olympus, where the ancient Greeks' most powerful gods clash with the mighty villains of Greek mythology. Yes, we can pit Zeus against Medusa. We can have Athena fighting the Cyclops. This is the kind of thing that we've been waiting for so long. I think this is absolutely brilliant. This might actually get me into video gaming, which I've managed to hold off from before now. So if anyone has tried Temple of Thunder, do let us know, because I would love to hear what the outcome is and how and who you pitted against who. Then what's coming up? Don't forget, on the 5th of May, there is an online summer lecture by Professor Edith Hall, Euripides' Medea, barbarian, witch, murderer, goddess. So do tune in for that if you can. And before that, also on the 28th of April, the Lytham St Anne's Classical Association is having its final meeting of the year, and it's Paul Roberts from the Ashmolean Museum. Now, I am not sure if that is being broadcast online or if it's only going to be an in-person lecture. If you can get to Lytham St Anne's, you'll definitely hear it, and hopefully it's an online lecture as well that you can join in and join the society to listen to that lecture from afar. We've talked about the YouTube video of the Stephen Fry lecture. You can have a look at that, and there's also one by me talking about the historical context of Euripides' Bacchae that was part of our Warwick Drama Festival. That's on YouTube as well to have a look at, listen to. And we've also been recording a podcast recently with History Hit with Tristan Hughes. So how to party like an ancient Greek, which is very, very relevant at the moment for people who are being fined for partying very, very, very wrongly indeed. Fined and perhaps more after today. So if you want to know about how to party properly and stay within the rules, then listen to the Symposium podcast on History Hit. And if you haven't had enough about dogs, dogs. I mean, there's just dogs everywhere at the moment. Robotic dogs in Pompeii. History Hit has also done a podcast about dogs in ancient Greece. And Tristan is joined by Dr. Owen Rees of Manchester Metropolitan University to find out about dogs in ancient Greece. And if dogs are not your thing, then of course there's an In Our Time on Antigone for you to have a listen to as well if you want to. Now, have we got time for a final question? Yes, we have. Sarah Scotty asks, why was the city of Babylon abandoned? Dun, dun, dun. Why haven't they made a film about this? I do wonder. So the city of Babylon has an extraordinarily long history. City flourishing way before any of the cities of ancient Greece and Rome, of course. But it came to a really high point under Nebuchadnezzar II, and that's in the 6th and 5th centuries BCE. It then fell to, and that's when the Hanging Gardens of Babylon and all of that kind of stuff is supposed to have been created. Then it fell to the Persians, who took over Babylon in 539 BCE and then was part of the Persian Empire of Cyrus, Xerxes, etc., etc. And then, of course, it was captured by Alexander the Great when he swept through Asia in the 330s BC. And, of course, it's to where he returned to when he couldn't go any further east. He had to come back. Babylon is actually, of course, where he died. Now, that's when Babylon's story gets difficult for poor old Babylon, because after Alexander the Great died, there was the great schism of his empire as lots of different generals fought to take over different bits of it, and it all became very bitty, and Babylon's kind of future then at that point turned bleak, and people started fleeing and leaving the city. It just kind of lost out in that big kind of war of all the successors, never really got picked up as a central power place anymore. There's some stories even that people were officially relocated to other places as well. And by the time the Parthians came through to kind of take over from the empire that was established in that area, one of the successor empire, the Seleucid Empire, by the time the Parthians came through, which was about in 140s BCE, Babylon was an abandoned wreck. So it's not a kind of mysterious overnight abandonment that we could come up with some great kind of ghoulish kind of reason for, or plague that killed everyone. It was simply finally, after such a long history, caught very much in the no man's land between empires and boundary lines and power bases in that aftermath of the death of Alexander the Great, and it just, no one was fighting for Babylon anymore. Which led to its abandonment. But it has had a rather odd history, and anyone who's been to the modern site of Babylon will attest to this, that in 1983, Saddam Hussein decided that it was time to rebuild Babylon in his kind of quest to sort of put himself forward as a leader on par with some of the ancient world leaders of the region. And so he insisted on rebuilding Babylon over the site of the original place, which has meant kind of like pretty monstrous reconstruction that you can go and see. And he copied things like ancient rulers of Babylon used to put their name on the stamp on each brick, and so Saddam Hussein did the same thing, and you can see kind of that still sitting there today. So a bit of a kind of horrible taste in the mouth to the recreation of Babylon from the 1980s, but what an amazing place it is. And Sarah, thank you so much for your question. We are out of time. As ever, it's too much fun talking to you all, but kind of next time we're going to have to take another bit of a major break, because as I said, I'm getting married in 9 days and then we are going away for our honeymoon. So the next chance to talk to you guys will be the 19th of May at 5 p.m. So I look forward to seeing you on the 19th of May at 5 p.m. And in the meantime, stay safe. I hope you have a wonderful time with the good weather that we've been enjoying, at least here in the UK, over the past couple of weeks. And stay safe. Thank you so much indeed for joining in the Q&A. Take care. See you soon.